people, right? Okay. Then what that represents is the will that has kept them as a people. It is really believing in that, and that is the driving, no matter how politically, philosophically, and otherwise people push back against it. I'm not talking about that right now. I'm saying that does, and that's what myths do hold and constitute. They represent the will, just like a will that someone leaves after they die, literally and figuratively. That's what a myth is. Myth is holding the will of the people, to the extent that that is a master piece or part of their existence. Never let go of this story of us, because it is our connection with this story of us that drives us from one generation to the next generation to the next generation. It contains our ethnic spirit. It contains our will as a people, the myth. Okay. That's why African Americans need a social myth. That's just one part of it. It's like you need that to drive you. You need that to hold you. You need that to get you through what you got to get through, that's going to continue to come at you perennially as long as you and your generations exist. You need that can be resorted to. Say, oh, remember this. And if it's a good one, it's got your your familiarity with it. And they was just, oh, I need my courage card right now. I need my faith card right now. I need my discipline card right now. You know, card, principle, etc. If you have a social myth that includes all of these critical characteristics and capacities, ma'aruf, you have those in there. If you can find, where is our story of courage in our master narrative? Who do we go to? Is it Queen Nzinga? Who else? Who else? What about our faith card, right? You see? And so you have these people who are the embodiment of these values, and these values have to be instantiated and incorporated into a story that we teach to our generations, so that when they run into those hard times, and they will, and the temptations that they run into, and they will, you know, and the moments that suggesting give up, they need a story. They need to have a story that they're familiar with. Say, no, that's not what we do. All right. So just understand, this is why it's needed. And we need one that's clear, one that's powerful, one that's potent, one that's comprehensive. You gotta ask yourself, do we have that? I will say to you, we do. And it is us. I said, do we have it? I said, we do. We do. Everything that we do. And it is our literal history, the history of Bilalians, African Americans, Blacks, the up from slavery, the once chattel slaves, da 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 da. Read that story, and you got the most powerful social myth in the context that I've been speaking this morning, There's nobody's mythical history that they constructed for their ethnic preservation, salvation, etc. It's not as good as our true story. There is no European myth, Asian myth, even put it in the context of just purely African myth that outstrips the myth once it's understood. And again, taking myth the way we've defined it this morning, our story eclipses all stories. But we just don't know our story under God. So let me go on. So inshallah, we can get to know it better. Okay, so the role of this myth is, again, what it does, it preserves the common nature, the common sense, and the common aspirations that make them a people. Those are the nuts and bolts of a healthy social myth. The nuts and bolts of a healthy social myth. It carries the ethnic spirit of the people, whoever they are. It is a reflection of the will that keeps them as a people. It expresses the common nature, the common sense, meaning when you hear the word intuitive, counterintuitive, right? Intuitive, literally in that expression, means common sense, right? It's like, okay, everybody knows. There's some things that everybody knows. Whoever in a tribe, in a people, is like, well, everybody knows. There's a common sense. Okay, what you do, you preserve that inside of the myth. What is the common sense of the people? Your myth, a good myth, would do that. It preserves the common nature. Everybody, it expresses the common nature of, quote unquote, the people, whoever that is, the tribe, the nation, whoever they are, Europeans, Arabs, Africans, whatever. The common nature, the common sense, the common aspirations that make them a people, right? What comes to mind, right? America is America. I mean, if you can reject your being an American, but by that strict definition of it, but there's something inside the aspirations of, quote unquote, all Americans that, lie, hypocrisy or not, etc. A part of it is still the social myth that is America. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal and endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. And among these, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. This is a part of the social myth of America, right? Land of the free, home of the brave, etc., etc. I mean, wonderful, beautiful aspirations hypocritically addressed. I'm not trying to get into that. We do know that. And to get away from that idea, because there's just so much to be talked about there, where the Imam said, listen, because these people who wrote these words, they had slaves, for example. Right, and John Adams' wife is well known for her pushing back on her husband. I think he was his second president of the United States. Doesn't matter. I know he's the vice president. I'm pretty sure. But there's famous writing of her to him and said, "Now here we are fighting the British for things that we are denying the slave right here. It's like we're fighting the British to give us these treatment, this equality, and blah blah. But look at us, we're slaveholders." And her letter sort of ends, or at least that part that you usually see. Said, "But you well know my position on these matters." So she said, "It's like, I already know you ain't gonna change in terms of that, and you already know I'm not gonna change either. But y'all being hypocritical in this." And Imam Mohammed, speaking of that condition or that situation, he said the Caucasian, the founding fathers, quote unquote, they were given an idea that was bigger than they were. They were given an idea that was bigger than they were, right? Right. So come on, all you gotta do is just look at us in general, overall. It's not, like you said, it's uncontroversial to say that, there's a lot of Muslims, Black, African American Muslims, what have you, who we wear the names, we wear the labels, we practice the rituals, etc., but we don't truly live up to the values that we claim. We don't. We all fall short. All of us, we do fall short. And Al-Islam is not responsible, right, for the behavior of those who claim to be Muslims, but who behave in a way contrary to their claim, right? So it's not the idea of Al-Islam. It's not the problem. The problem is the one who claim the idea of Islam, right? And I've heard it said also, it said an idea is not responsible for the people who claim to believe it. Right? The idea is not responsible for the people who claim to believe it. It's like, so this declaration, the idea is not responsible for Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and whoever owning slaves, right? The idea is the idea. The idea is true. The idea is valid. Now, whether they live up to it is different. And that applies to everybody and across the board. Sometimes we are in touch with ideas that are bigger than we are, right? And that we don't live up to, right? But the point is that we just said slight tangent. The idea is that these parchments, the Constitution, Declaration of Independence, even the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, all of that, this is a part of what makes Americans Americans. That's the myth of America. And you can, when you look into, and this when the Imam talked about New World patriotism, for example, and you have the classic picture of him and the circumstance of which he picked up the flag. Is if you won't pick it up, God damn it, I'll pick it up myself. Because the Imam was seeing, I'll mention Reinhold Niebuhr. Look him up. I won't go any further than that. The Imam was seeing, when he talked about New World patriotism, he was seeing what we weren't seeing. It's like, and there were those who didn't have the ability to make the distinction between the ideal, the values, the ma'ruf that were and are embodied in the best of America, and being patriotic to that, as opposed to Ronald Reagan's America or even a Donald Trump's America, which wasn't existing at that time. Not him as the embodiment of it, but there were those whose Barry Goldwater, maybe somebody like that, whatever. The point is that there is a social myth that is America, that is good and useful and valuable and an embodiment of the best. But of course, we say again, there's been a hypocritical salute to it and a holding up of it and a hiding of white supremacy and white nationalism and so many other things under the red, white, and blue. We get that. But that doesn't deny the value of the Ma'arufi principles that are embodied in the American myth. So let's move on. I want us to understand that a good social myth does all these things. It holds the ethnic spirit. It holds the will that keeps a people, right? It expresses the common nature, the common sense, and the common aspirations that make a people. And always ask yourself, do we have that? Do we have that? Do we have that? I'm saying we do have that. It's in our history, but we need to bring it out, lay it out, instantiate it, memorialize it in a way that is objective. And I don't mean objective in the sense of being unbiased. I mean, just raise it up so it go, okay, now I see it. That's what I mean, objective. It's in us, it's in our history, but do we see it, right? And has it been codified in the way that it needs to be codified so that we have these examples of, and this is the great book, the Carry On Tradition, does that. And of course, an expansion of that is necessary, and inshallah will come, and an incorporation and reaching out and embracing and drawing from all of this time behind us, all this chronology, these things what? The ethnic spirit, the common nature, the common sense, the common aspirations that is in our history that have brought us to a place where we, thus far, that we have survived, even to have this conversation right now. If there's only one of us, and it's not, but if there was only one of us continue to have a conversation like this, acknowledging and embracing that, then that's a sign that we do have that which causes the survival of the best from us and of us and in us. We do that, but now it needs to be instantiated. I have to use that word. It has to be instantiated in a transmissible package in the easiest ways, and the historical ways that human beings have done that is that they put it together as a master narrative. They put it together as a myth. They put it together such that you can get an end-to-end understanding that carries all of the most excellent things about us from the past, and that help us in the present, and that will carry us into the future. All right, the Imam says, and that has made for the spirit that has survived and lasted. They have an idea of whether it is a myth or a fact. It is a combination of both myth and fact. So it is for the European. So the Arabs have it and the European. Here's an image here, artistically, but this is an embodiment of a myth, a European myth, right? So this is the Imam again. The Imam said, the white man has a myth and fact that he can relate to, that he can recall, that gave his people a long time ago a sense of identity. Now, just that word right there, big issue for us. And that's the solution. We have the solution, wallahi. And just simply put, Bilalian. It's like, we're going to unpack this before this is over. But Bilalian answers the social myth aspect. And when you overlay and connect the life history of Bilal, and I know there are people who are beyond Bilal, and I ain't mad. I get it. I understand it in that sense. But I do understand the kind of side-eye shade that it throws at the idea of saying that, no, we need to go beyond Bilal. Yeah, on one level, that's true. That's like, say a Nation of Islam is more than bean pies, right? We need to go beyond bean pies, right? Yeah. Bean pies are very, very important. In fact, they say a lot about. But the point is that I just need to hit that, and I'm not going to stay there. We'll come back to that sometime in the future. So the sense of identity, that is what is needed. That is a big, big critical piece that it's really at the heart of our problem. It's like, who are we? And how do you label who we are? And inside of that label, does it carry the components? Does it have all of the equipment that an identity is to bring to a person? Is the label that is being used, is that the one that will help us? Can I live through that identity and use the tools that come with that label to make progress in the world in the best way? All that is incorporated in the issue of identity. Okay. So he can recall that gave his people a long time ago a sense of identity. In the myth about the European people, the Roman people, which the other Europeans identify with, in the myth about the Roman people, there's a story of two brothers who found themselves without parents, orphans, both with no parents. That is, two boys. Worse than that, they didn't even have human beings to take care of them, so they're all alone. The myth says that a wolf nursed them. They suckled off of a she-wolf, right? That's what this imagery was here. They suckled off of a she-wolf, and it made possible their survival. See, that's their myth. And so when we go back to the former page, and I'm not going to do it, when you go back to the former page, it is that iconography, that symbolism, that story that embodies their ethnic spirit, right? That embodies their will, that keeps them as a people, that embodies their idea of their common nature, of their common sense, of their common aspirations, the idea that we were raised by a she-wolf. That was their myth, right? The myth says that a wolf nursed them, that they suckled off of a she-wolf, and it made possible for their survival. They grew up under the training of a wolf. See, because this becomes where they get their values from, where they get their sense of themselves, where they get their identity, where they get their sense of place in creation. This is who we are, right? We were raised by wolves. So, and that gives them that spirit, gave them that spirit, and maintained their will as a people. All right. Carrying on, it says, when they got to be big boys, they decided that they would become conquerors. One was too weak to jump over the wall to get into the city, so his brother condemned him and abandoned him. His brother jumped over the wall to get into the city. The brother jumped over the wall, went into the city, and became the father of the Roman people. His name in the myth is Romulus. That is an idea. It is only a myth, but it is an idea. And you know who the other brother was? Remus. Yeah, Romulus and Remus. And then when you go to Disneyland, the Disney company, then the world in this world, Uncle Remus. Uncle Remus. So that's the black germ and the brown germ in two different forms, right? So it's like the black germ was the strong germ, and the brown germ was the weak germ, and they take the weak germ, the brown germ, to its apex, you get a white man, a devil, right? This is the myth of the Nation of Islam. But then in their myth, the European myth, we were, quote unquote, the parallel brown germ, the Remus of it all. For them was the black, right? Just flipped on his head, right? So Uncle Remus became the identity that in their myth they gave to us. And then Disney animates it and projects it around the world, and that becomes our place in their myth, and that becomes a part of our identity formation, those and many, many other ideas like that. If you've never seen this documentary called Ethnic Notions, you should look it up. Ethnic sorry, Ethnic Notions. All right, so let me see. Okay, let's see if we can walk through this. All right, so you have this idea here. Okay, let me see. Okay. All right. So I have all the granddaughters. We have. It's a team effort. All the granddaughters are still over here. I asked them this morning, do y'all live here? So it's just wonderful having a great time together. So if you hear a little background, just see it as loving musical chatter behind what we're saying. So I'm gonna walk back through, because now when we talk about social myth, right? So understand this in the context of social myth. We're paralleling what was done for the people that we know today called Jews, what was done, the process that it actually went through, and that the Jews that we have now those that are identified as Jews, they are a product of myth makers. That's not just me talking. That's Shlomo Sand, Tel Aviv University, professor of Jewish history. There was no Jewish people. That's what he said. He wrote, he published as a professor at the top Jewish university. All right. And he's the leader of it. Right. So there was no Jewish people. All right. So we're going to walk through how do you get from no people to a culture. All right. And we're going to draw the parallel between what happened with them and what Farad did to create the tribe of Shabazz. Now, again, I have to send you back to, I don't know, was it number 6? I don't know. I think it was number 6, where we describe Sephardim and the Jewish connection between the creation of Farad's myth. There's a very clear connection there. So you have to go back and look at that. So very quickly, culture comes out of, or the pathway of the creation of culture is through problem, instinct, idea, ideology, institution, culture. All right. I usually use P, then 4 I's. P, I. You got 1, 2, 3. Did I get 4? P, I, C. So it's P, 4 I's, and a C. P is problem. The first I is instinct. The second I is idea. Third I is ideology. The fourth I is institution. And then what arises out of that is culture. All right? Let's use America real quick. This land that we call America and that we now call Americans, et cetera, that was a creation. You understand? America, right, is a cultural creation. It didn't exist. It did not exist. There was no such way of governing in the world at the time of the establishment of the, quote, United States of America. Never existed. First time it ever came into existence was, quote unquote, 1776. Right? It exists now, and it is self-perpetuating now. Where did it start? Started with a problem. The problem was taxation without representation. I'm not going to stay there. I just want you to understand that the PIIIC is what also gave us America. And when you go back and look at any other established nation, country, culture, etc., you get the PIIIC. That's for everything. And okay, so now we're just showing, just as an example, well, that's how we get Jewish people through a PIIIC scenario. Right? Okay. So what was the problem? The problem that they face, see, and I want us to understand, for as far as Bilalians, Blacks, African Americans, et cetera, is concerned, we also start with a problem. the problem is how to return to our original humanity. That's essentially the problem. But I'm limiting our conversation at this point to comparing what happened with the quote unquote Jewish people and what happened with what Farad Muhammad did. So what's the problem? The problem that they begin with is how to move from being an individual Jew, and this is based on Max I. Dimont, D-I-M-O-N-T, his explanation of how we got the Jews that we know of today. Where did they come from? They were a product of a work done by Ezra and Nehemiah, right? These are scholars of Jewish history. It's not me and this is what the high-line elite scholars of the subject. This is what they've said. So instincts, right? Okay, that was a problem. The problem was how to move from being an individual Jew to becoming a Jewish people. How does that happen? Okay, well, there were two highborn Jews, we call them Jews now, two highborn Jews, Nehemiah and Ezra and Nehemiah, both influential in the Persian court circles. They had the instinct for the problem. I mean, you have certain people that say, I have an idea about how to deal with that. But before they have the idea, you have to have the right people that have the instincts for it. And this was the case, right? The case was that Ezra and Nehemiah, okay, we have an instinct, we have a feel for how we could actually deal with this problem, right? And so then they came up with the idea. And what was their idea? Their idea was to embed a feeling of Jewishness even deeper in the Jewish soul than the prophets had thrust it. This is the way Max I. Dimont in, I think, The History of the Jews, the title of the book, we covered it in the past segments. No, he said, I believe it's The History of the Jews. He said that they wanted to drive that feeling, the feeling of Jewishness, pardon me, they wanted to drive that feeling into the unconscious so deeply that it could become a part of their total personality. So just understand, even at that time, way back, we're talking thousands of years ago, they had the idea of how to get into the psyche and embed in the psyche of their target ideas that would become part of their total personality. And the Egyptian Ankh, called the key of life, is a symbol of that very methodology, which you're not going to go into. Okay, so this is there was a problem. How do we move from being individual Jews to being a Jewish people? There were two that had an instinct for it. Okay, and they came up with an idea. And here's our idea: do this, embed the feeling of Jewishness deeper in the Jewish soul than the prophets had thrust it, etc. All right. Apply that to the condition of the so-called American Negro, the chattel slave, right? What's the problem? The problem, this is as of Farad's time, right? What's the problem? The problem is reversing the effects of the experimental clinic on the descendants of chattel slaves from America. So in 1930, when Farad started his work, or at least the way that the myth gives it, because he said, I came on July 4th, 1930. Okay, well, that's part of the myth. Part of the myth, because that part of the message inside of my myth is that I'm coming here for independence. I'm coming to bring about the independence. I'm coming to set free those who are bound up in the psyche of this world's culture and myth. So that was the problem. The problem is how to reverse the effects of the experimental clinic on the descendants of chattel slaves from Africa. So Farad, who is among the Sephardim, which is a Jewish sect, he had a background that was associated with Oriental and esoteric knowledge, right? We talked about, yes, so that you go and look into part 6 of this series. You look into that and then we go into the details of that. So just like Ezra and Nehemiah had had instincts for moving his people. They were Jews, but they were not a people, right? So how do you move from being individual Jews to becoming a Jewish people? That was the idea that they were. And it was Ezra and Nehemiah that had an idea. Okay, we have an idea about how we can go about it. And then we just read what their idea was. Okay, Farad had the same thing. Okay, here's a problem. The problem is that the descendants of the chattel slaves from Africa, they are the sleeping, mentally dead, so-called American Negro. It's like that's a problem, and we need to reverse the effects of what has been imposed in and on them. We need to switch that out. We need to change that, right? So for us, I have an idea. Okay, he had the instincts because he comes from people of those instincts. Now here's his idea, right? Encapsulated. It said Farad's teaching focused on addressing the psychological and social needs of African Americans using strategic and pragmatic methods to create a new cultural and religious identity distinct from Western influences. He said, I'm going to disconnect. I'm going to set you free from. I'm going to cut the cultural and religious wires that have been put in your head, and we're going to start all over. All right. His approach incorporated various ideas and materials aiming to stimulate critical thinking, self-awareness, and independent Black consciousness among his followers. By employing strategic myths and narratives, he sought to challenge existing knowledge and foster self-determination and empowerment within the African American community. So if you wanted to say, I propose that if you want to embody what is Farad's hypothesis, what was Farad's thesis, right? What was Farad's experiment? What was Farad's idea? That's it, right? That's it right there, right? And those things have happened and are happening. Let's go on to the next phase. So remember this, PIIIC. There's the problem, instinct, idea. So we talked about the Jewish problem, Jewish instinct, Jewish idea. So we're talking now about Farad's problem, Farad's instinct, Farad's idea. Let's go back. On the Jewish side of the question, how does theirs continue? And that is, so the ideology, okay. So you start with, you have idea, let's go back. Okay, you have idea, right? Idea. And you have ideology. Ology, idea. An ideology is the logic of the idea, okay? The logic of the idea, all right? So that's what ideology is. So you can have the instinct for something and then have an idea about it, but you can't put it to work until you formalize it as an ideology. When you formalize it as an ideology, now you can begin to make things happen. You can make things work, right? Right? So, for as far as Jewishness is concerned, this is the continuation of the problem, instinct, idea. Now, their next step being ideology. So, what do? They created a master narrative. Is again back we're bearing on the significance of you got to have a story. You have to have a story, a sacred story, right? And I want to say here, I hope I'm coming through on it. I want to say it's like when we say, yeah, we have to have a sacred story, right? I'm saying the beauty of us is we don't have to manufacture a sacred story. Our whole life and history is the sacred story. What happened to us and what is happening to return as a whole to that state That is a sacred story. It really, really happened in our life, and it's being and it is Allah, the creator of the heavens and the earth, who has been. Some people don't get it, don't take it, don't believe it, because it's like y'all doing too much. I think sometimes people say, "Oh, he's doing the most," right? So no, it's like no, really, Allah has, like Moses in the Ark of Reeds and all of that, floating down into Pharaoh's house. That really happened. That is our life. What do you think the slave ship is anything different than Moses in the Ark of Reeds winding up in Pharaoh's house? What is different than slave ships winding with us landing here in America? You can't see, you can see Jonah, you can see Yusuf, you can see all that in the reality of our story. So our sacred master narrative is really just the explication and the expression of meaning, coming to the place where we can explicate, express, and raise up to the awareness of the world. Our history is a sacred master narrative. In reality, it's not a made-up myth. What really happened to us is the real sacred narrative that is, we dampen down with the term sacred, but it's really by Allah's divine hand that this has happened. And it's for the benefit. We're not even near the end yet, brother and sister, but I'm saying it because we're here in the piece. And the world is yet to benefit from the fullness. Like Joseph, when he saw the 11 stars and the sun and the moon bowing down to him, that's coming, right? Let's go on. So, okay, so the Jewish said create a master narrative and a synthetic history. See, ours is not a synthetic history. Ours is an authentic history, an organic history. Really important. So it's like we don't need to create one. We just need to publish the one we have. MashaAllah. Okay, well, that's my sign that we got about 5 minutes to close out. So let's finish up. Okay, create a man. Okay, this is what the Jews do. Create a master narrative and a synthetic history, which would become the identity of every Jew. So it's like, by this myth, live in this myth. In this way, we become a people. So Professor Shlomo Sand of Tel Aviv University said most stories of national identity formation in the Bible are myths, including the exodus from Egypt and the conquest under Joshua. This is what the Jewish professor of Tel Aviv University is saying in terms of the invention of the Jew. That's his book. His book is The Invention of the Jewish People. And what comes out of an ideology is an institution. You institutionalize this synthetic history, this master narrative. You institutionalize it in the form of what? Judaism as a religion. So now the religion, the Imam pointed out the Nation of Islam, the ideology, the quote unquote the religious ideals of the Nation of Islam. It says is this Trinitarianism painted black. Trinitarianism painted black. Won't go into it, but the idea that wherever God the Father, Mary and Jesus, where they were, Babaji, Alfonso, and Babaji, Alfonso, and Farad, they replaced God the Father, Mary, and Jesus. Alfonso, Babaji, and Farad Muhammad. It's just the institutionalization of the ideology, and that's what you have. So it becomes a religion, right? So Judaism is that religion that came as a product of and the extension of and the instantiation, the institutionalization of going all the way back to the problem, the instinct, the idea, the ideology, and boom, now here, practice this as a way of life. And then that becomes the embodiment of our original intention, Ezra and Nehemiah, of our original intention to make a people where before we were not a people. And the success of doing that over the generations gives rise to a culture. And a culture is a group of people who share preferred qualities and evaluations and are loyal to certain central themes and master ideas that reinforce the narrative that, in this case, the Jews are the chosen people. Do you think that they've been successful in getting the world to bow to the idea and such that if you don't say that that's true, it's like you are insulting reality, right? Do you think that they have gotten the world of the West, excuse me, the world of the West to bow to that idea? They have been successful at that, supremely and immensely successful at doing what Ezra and Nehemiah had an instinct for. And that's the world we're living in right now. That's how those things, or things, how ideas become realities in the world. That's what we just talked about. Okay, Farad, his motivation was to do the same thing for the sleeping mentally dead so-called American Negro. He said, okay, I got an idea. I got an ideology. So he creates a master narrative, Yaqub's myth, and everything that goes with deportation of the moon, everything else, the tribe of Shabazz, etc. It creates a master narrative and a synthetic history, which would become the identity of every so-called American Negro. This is, he said, when Farad came, he said he came with 17 million keys, right? 17 million keys. They said that's how many, quote unquote, so-called American Negroes were in the United States at that time. So I got 17 million keys, and these keys are for the rusty locks, and the rusty locks is the mind of so-called American Negro, and he's trying to unlock them, set them free, etc. That's all a part of the master narrative. That's the ideology, right? So what was institutionalized? What's institutionalized was the idea that these are the lost found members of the Nation of Islam living in the wilderness of North America. A lot to unpack in that, but we used to call, just generally speaking, was that not only when we would go out to invite people to come to the temple, they would call the dead, man, you got to go out and get the dead. So there's just the dead. So wherever the Negro was, is that it's the dead. Man, how many dead you bring today? So that was the idea. But then also the idea that we were the lost found. You were lost, now you're found, right? But then no, you're not just the lost found. You're the lost found members of the Nation of Islam, which is that's a hint, or let's call it a landmine, that Farad left to say, look, it's like you're becoming a part of, you become a part of the international ummah, which was just called in that title, the Nation of Islam living in the wilderness of North America. You're a member of the Nation of Islam living in the wilderness of North America. But the Nation of Islam really carried the meaning, the Ummah of Islam. You're just the lost found members of the Ummah International, but now you've been found in the wilderness of North America. And so when we in the temple would stand up, say, who wants to stand up and put their name in the Lamb's book, the Lamb's Book of Life, or what have you. I mean, after you got the teaching, say you want to stand up. That's what we call it. Say you want to stand up and join the Nation of Islam. And when the people would stand up and become a part of it, it said, now understand, you're not just becoming a member of this temple, this place in America. You become a part of the international body of Islam, the international body of Muslims, right? So there was the lost found members. We're members, but we were lost. Now we're found. And we're members of what? The Nation of Islam, which is what? The international body of Muslims. But where are you? You're living in the wilderness of North America. And that was the institution. So the Nation of Islam in the world, and even now people just call it the nation. I mean, and cut off so much stuff. It's like the whole name is the lost found members of the Nation of Islam living in the wilderness of North America. So, but now, man, he in the nation. There's a lot lost in that translation. And finally, so that the institutionalization of that it created a culture. We were genuinely a culture, a group of people who shared preferred qualities and evaluations and are loyal to certain central themes and master ideas that reinforce the narrative. So we got the message to the black man, we have the FOI and MGT and everything that went along with that. That was and that is a culture for those who subscribe to it then. There was a temporality, a temporariness, even in the word temple. There was a temporariness of it, and which that comes up next when we talk about it. But for today, this is going to be it for today. I'll say this to you. I'm gonna work out whether or how or if we're going to play this segment. But in the interim, going back to a homework piece, get the movie, rent it, whatever, however you get to it. V for Vendetta, and just the segment from the whole movie applies, but the segment from 1 hour and 8 minutes to 1 hour and 27 minutes, you will get in that a picture of how the Nation of Islam as an institution had the effect of setting the minds free, okay, with a noble lie. All right? So that's your homework if you accept it, and it'll benefit you. So let me stop the share right now. And any comments before we close out? Tyson, if you come on back through if you have comments that you want to make. Or
Alhamdulillah. Exceptional again. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to what we got coming next. Learning so much every time.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Well, as always, you are a major force in this process, young man. All right. Anybody else before we sign out?
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam, Imam. How you doing?
Alhamdulillah, Imam. Thank you again. And I just wanted quick, when you kind of pricked my interest when you were saying high story, and I thought about a comment that Imam said that the Bible is only sacred basically by interpretation, and I thought about the masses always keeping the Bible above the masses, where the Quran was given to the masses. That difference in that line of thought that you was bringing up. Thank you, brother Imam.
Thank you. The Imam has done so much trust. I mean, this is skeletal. I don't care how much time, hours and hours have been spent so far. It's truly skeletal. But you bring up the idea about the shoe God, the Imam, when he explains about the shoe God, right? And how the God Shu, SHU, is still carried in the word shoe, SHOE, in our world. And as we talked about yesterday, we mentioned in passing that the manipulative manufactured quality of the English language. So you have shoe. The Imam said, look at the word shoe, SHOE, and said, how do you get the sound oo out of the OE? How do you get shoe out of SHOE? No, it's because the world told you to say it that way, and because it's to stay connected with the shoe God. And when Moses came to the burning bush, quote unquote, he had to take off his shoes. And the Imam said, essentially, and I'm abbreviating it, he said, because the world had been given a foundation that was above their head. And so that world, that idea, that ideology, that religion that's in the culture, from the culture that you're in right now, is keeping you disconnected from the nature of reality, because they have given you a foundation of knowledge that's above your head. So, and that's the idea of the world being turned upside down, etc. So, mashallah, yeah, it's something significant there. All right. We are going to be out, all right? Everybody have a wonderful.
Ma'am, assalamu alaikum.
Very quick, please, sir.
Yeah. You mentioned the story of Yusuf.
I did.
Yes, and is those stories of the prophets, each one is a part of the segment of the whole narrative, each one of those prophets.
They are. What can I say? It's like, I don't know, if you treat it as a necklace, let's just say as a necklace, right? It's like all those stories are part of our necklace, if that necklace be our master narrative. But it relates in part, particularly so to different people at different times, but almost all of them, if not all of them, but I just won't say it, almost all of them relate to us in our present set of, and I think that's a part of Allah's grace and the part of the stamp that Allah has put on us because of all that we went through, unprecedented in history. God said, I'm going to, how can you say, I'm going to, I got to figure out what it means when you put a necklace on somebody. I'm going to put this necklace on you, and on your necklace is going to be everybody's. Jesus Christ's story, Moses' story, Yusuf's story, Joshua's story, all their Samson's story, all those. And that's what the Imam did for us. The Imam said, look, man, let me tell y'all bigger than you think you are. You're not even willing to embrace how big, great, powerful, and important you are in the history of man and in the will of God. That's where we are. And that's why it's like, man, how come ain't 1,000 people paying attention to this? Because we don't get it. It's unprecedented. It's like, nah, yeah.
So is it like a vignette if you're doing an analysis on a person's life circumstances? And it's like sometimes they have an example of a vignette.
Yes, you could say that, just like Tyson's book, right? These stories in the book, they're just vignettes of the longer stories of those individuals. If you unpack them, if you just cover them all, it's massive, right? Yeah. So yeah, that and this is I want to restate, we Bilalian people, we are an embodiment of God's divine will and I'm not drunk. I'm just saying we are an embodiment in this time of Allah's will for the world. For the world needs who and what we are unpacked, in place, and active. But we need to understand, do you know who you are? You're Neo. No, I'm not Neo. Yeah, you're Neo. No, I don't believe that. But that's it. I mean, that's us.
So I'm this is my last one.
Okay.
So those characteristics of the soul, the taqwa and the fujur, and I'll say even the ruh is a part of that analysis, even in all of those stories about the prophets.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So we can apply, if we're doing an analysis on the vignette, you can look into where is the fujur of Abraham, where is the taqwa of Abraham in this vignette to bring out his humanity, or in Abraham's case, and in Yusuf's case too, the concept of tawheed that we lack an understanding of.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I mean, yeah. It's like all human beings, and even those personifications that you talked about, Abraham, Moses, that you can find all those things in them because it's tawheed. But it's like, you have to have the willingness, the interest, and really the value, because it's important that the Prophet, peace be upon him, he tells us he seeks refuge with Allah from knowledge that brings no benefit. And the Quran says, don't ask questions about which the answer which may cause you trouble, right? The idea is that if we have a substantive purpose for deriving certain information from various subjects, whether those be individuals or historic moments, it's like, yeah, pursue them. But if they're just empty pursuits, that's Al-Islam denies that. That being said, it's like, yes, you're gonna be able to find taqwa, fujur, tawheed, etc. You're gonna be able to find them practically everywhere you look when you're looking for them, because creation is one, and every individual is a reflection of the archetypal whole, right? Abraham is a model of something about human nature. Muhammad and Noah and Yusuf and all of them, they're human beings, quote unquote. And as human beings, they are a composite. They contain everything that any other human being would contain. And since in every human being is the fujur and the taqwa, etc., you're going to be able to find it everywhere you look. So,
Alhamdulillah. Thank you.
all right, thank you. All right. Thank you all for your presence. May Allah guide us to the best and forgive us our shortcomings. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.